Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome everybody to the greatest love story ever told. And we've got some people joining us for the first time, so I want to welcome them. If you joining us online via the live Zoom link, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that way as we're going through and your voice is being heard, people can kind of recognize who you are.
For the two friends that I have joining, I also just let them know if they don't want to talk.
Okay.
They just want to
Yep,
listen
that's
in
fine.
and check it
Okay.
out. That's okay.
Yep.
Not to their comfortability.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. There's no pressure. If you just want to listen, you'd rather not speak or anything like that, or read. That's fine. We welcome as
Whatever.
much or as little as you
Participation.
would like.
We got the Clements family over here. I am Aiden. My mom and dad will be in soon. Their names are Valerie and David. They'll be hopefully be in soon. So, but anyways, this is the Clements family over here. Hello, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And then here in the room with us, we have my wife
Hello, Tamara.
and my son
Aaron, how you doing?
and his wife.
Sil.
Hello. And their little baby, Elijah. He's not going to be speaking yet.
Oh, he'll be voicing
You're
some
right,
opinions,
you're
I'm
right.
sure.
And Serenity, are you going to be in and out, or are you going to?
I was gonna hang out today. My name's Serenity.
Right. So, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and just open us up in prayer. I'm going to go over just some.
Yeah, are we gonna know who you
sorry,
are?
my name is Robert.
You just get to guess
Yeah.
who the guy talking is. He'll just be leading you without introduction. So
So I'm going to open us up in prayer, and then we'll go into just some guidelines, so you kind of understand the format or the format or structure of our presentation, and then we'll go into our study. So thank you, Heavenly Father, for this day. Thank you for another Sabbath day, a day of rest, to be able to lay down the burdens of this world and just be able to come and sit and rest in your presence, and to be able to lift our eyes up and acknowledge you and acknowledge all the ways that you show up in our lives, and just give you thanks and praise and glory. We ask that you pour out your Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit upon us, that we would have the eyes to hear and the eyes to see and the ears to hear the word that you would have for us today, that you would just be able to allow our words to be your words, and impart upon us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of what you would like to reveal to us today. Pray that you exalt our gathering, exalt our studies.
somebody in the
And we
meeting.
ask all of this in Yahushua's name, Selah.
Second, we might come.
Mhm.
Maybe I do.
What?
It kicked Braden out, and I think Alex had to leave or came back in, but it didn't let me know that I had people waiting in the waiting room again. So I'm gonna kind of keep this. Oops. Well, side of my screen here so I can watch it a little bit better.
Oopsie.
That's okay. Technology is quickly escaping me in my as I age, and it shouldn't, but it is. All right. So maybe if I keep that one up, and if you wouldn't mind letting them know if they, I guess I can just talk, y'all can hear me. So if anybody has anything that they need to chat, sometimes when I take off the bar on the top of the screen, then I can't see the chat function. I know we're going to get to this here in a second in the guidelines, but to just raise the hand function is really the best way for me to know that somebody wants to speak. Even if you don't speak, I can flip over and grab a chat also, to just let me know that you're there, and I'll confirm that that's what's going on. But then that way I can get this bar off the screen so that we can see everything in the presentation. I will keep the participation bar kind of tucked here off to the side, but it's probably going to get in the way a little bit, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. I just don't want to miss anybody if they have to jump out and come back.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and this is gonna be some of the information in our guidelines, the structure of our presentation. So these studies are being recorded. For those that are in the room, please be sure to be mindful of the noise in the room while we are recording. It can often be picked up by the mic and interfere with online listeners being able to hear. For those online, please use the raise hand function and keep yourselves muted until you are called on for better visual effect. Text box is not monitored at this time. And so what that kind of means is that sometimes what we find is with our audio and stuff like that, if especially with people that are joining us online, if we've got a couple people kind of talking at the same time, the audio ends up cutting itself out, and then we can't, everybody can't hear what somebody's trying to share or ask or comment on. So we just try to keep a little bit of an order to it, so we don't, so people aren't talking over each other, and we're not losing something that somebody's saying, or we're not missing a question that somebody has about something. So it's not to try to be bossy and controlling or anything like that, but it's just for clean audio and presentation, and making sure that we're not missing anything that somebody's asking or commenting. So excuse me. And we also ask that just for the purposes of everybody not being able to see everybody's face while we're speaking and stuff like that, is that if you do comment and or begin to speak, that if you would kind of introduce yourself, that way it's just helpful for other people to understand who's speaking, and and be able to identify who's saying things, to be able to, just for better overall clarity or direction. Understanding is a good word, yeah. So resources are available upon request. If you have not done so already, please check out our video called SO1. It's a Start Here on YouTube, on a YouTube channel, and it gets better understanding of the materials we use. So we use a lot of different resources, and we just, they become so just so part of our everyday study that sometimes I forget that people that don't, haven't been using some of these materials as long as we have, might not be as familiar. So we have a list of those materials out there, and we encourage people to never hesitate to ask, where are we finding that? Where are we getting that? Where, what source are you using? Yes, sir. Are you okay? And what source are you using, or how exactly do you use that source? Believe me, when we were first exposed to all these things, we didn't know how to effectively use these things, and we're still learning how to effectively use some of these tools and resources as we go. So please don't hesitate to ask a question. Our contact information is provided on the last slide, and that gives a link to our YouTube page and to our email address, and also my own personal phone number. I encourage anybody to call me anytime, day or night, And if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have something that just want to share or question about, I'm available all the time, and this is my passion, and I will always love to be able to talk about these subjects with anybody at any time. So go to the next slide. And this is where we just encourage you that you're welcome to participate as much or as little as you would like. We do ask sometimes for people to read if they would like, but you are always welcome to just pass if you would rather not read. And if it's stated so, like has been mentioned here in the beginning, if you just want to come in and listen, that is perfectly fine, and we welcome that as well. We review parking lot items, and what that means is sometimes we'll, in the midst of our studies and discussions, we'll kind of rabbit trail off into connecting areas of interest. And so we usually table those for parking lot items, and we haven't done a really good job of being able to circle back to some of those parking lot items. And I'm going to have to do a better job of that. We've been really gearing up for this next week. It's the beginning of the Hebrew New Year, and there's a lot of information that goes into that. So I've kind of fallen behind in regards to giving information on some of the topics that we've tabled. And I actually don't have those listed out in front of me right now, but we will try to in the next week or so at least start putting those back on the radar so that we can start addressing them. And so we've already done introductions. And anybody have any questions before we get started, or about anything, statements or comments? Okay. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and move into our next slide, which is the beginning of this series, or the beginning of this study. This series is on Exodus, and we started in Exodus 1, and we've been going through and just discovering what the nation of Israel was experiencing, how they got to Egypt, and how they're coming out of Egypt. And right now we are in the beginning of the plagues that were poured out on Egypt. And so just again, for a little bit of context into where we're heading here, is that you see here we have Exodus and a slash Shemot. Shemot is the Hebrew word. Shemot is the Hebrew word, and it refers to names and signs. And so what we discover is that the book of Exodus is actually a book of Yahuwah, our Father, our Heavenly Father's name and his signs, and Israel's names and their signs. And so that's what the entire book of Exodus is, and it's really laying the foundation for the Father's plan for his chosen people. I guess maybe that's not the right way to state that. He's not laying the foundation. He's explaining the foundation that he has already laid. And now he's walking his chosen people into it. Probably a better way of saying it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to start out in Exodus chapter 7, verses 1 through 4. And Tamara, if you want to start us off, we're going to go to the next slide. And Go ahead and read verses 1 through 3.
Do you want me to read it from the interlinear, or is whatever I'm reading it from good?
Yeah, whatever you're reading from is good.
This is. Its family is raising their hand. Let me see if.
Sorry, what chapter again?
It's gonna be,
Chapter 7.
yeah, chapter 7.
Thank you.
Chapter 7, verse 1. I'll be reading from the Hallelujah scriptures. This is Tamara. So Yahuwah said to Moshe, see, I have made you an Elohim to Pharaoh, and Aharon, your brother, is your, it says Nabai, so
Prophet.
Yeah.
your prophet. Thank you. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aharon, your brother, shall speak to Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go out of this land. But I am going to harden the heart of Pharaoh, and shall increase my signs and my wonders in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt.
Okay.
That's all it does. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is.
Yep. So, so again, just to kind of, go ahead and pull up the interlinear. Okay.
I was asking if you wanted me to read it from there because I.
Yeah.
so now I got it.
on the screen.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha.
So,
Hang on a second.
so, Aaron had mentioned, my son Aaron had mentioned, not.
Moshe's brother.
Yeah, not Moshe's brother, but Aaron had mentioned there are a lot of olive tobs in there. And so, so you might be asking yourself, what is an olive tob? And when my wife pulls up the interlinear on the screen here, we're gonna be able to see what that is. And again, just for context and reference, if you're not familiar with what the interlinear is, it's the Hebrew, it's basically the Hebrew Bible and how the Hebrew words were translated into the New King, or not the New King James, into the King James version. So when she gets it pulled up here, are you on this?
I
Okay.
mean, I'm at Bible Hub, but it was pulling from the Bible, not from the interlinear, so I had to change
Gotcha.
it. So now I'm back at the interlinear.
Quick chapter.
Yep, click chapter. And you guys, is the size of the font okay, or do I need to make it a little bit bigger?
I can read it.
So just another really quick reference here. I'm gonna have. Yeah. Yeah, so, Tamara's gonna have a little pointer here on the screen here in a second, if she can.
It's there.
It's there,
just,
okay.
let's take out for a second.
All right, so, so we'll go right here to the right-hand side of the screen. So Hebrew is read from right to left, not left to right. And so you see the number 1 there, that means verse 1 of this chapter. And then, and then what you're gonna see is at the very top, there's a number, and that number there is what's called a Strong's number. And it works in conjunction with the Strong's Concordance, which is basically a biblical dictionary of biblical words. So that number is the definition of this Hebrew word. So right underneath that number is the phonetic pronunciation of the Hebrew word. And that what she just circled is the Hebrew word, and those are the Hebrew letters going from right to left that spell that word. And then in red is what the King James translated that word to. And so what we find is that that not always are the translations of those words as accurate as they should be.
And let's go into it also so that we could describe. Let's go a little bit
Okay,
further. So
all right,
when
so
we,
go ahead.
when we click on the Strong's Hebrew number here,
Right.
it will then take you to another screen that really helps break down very specifically, oops, I'm a little bit too far. What the word is, excuse me, that we were looking at. So this is Amar, 559, Amar. And Amar means to say, speak, or utter. And the original Hebrew word is right here. And you'll notice that the word that we were looking at on the previous screen is a little bit longer. And so this is where some of the translation issues come into today. But really the original root word here is the word that we're after. So it will also let us know what part of the speech it is, if it's a verb or a noun or a preposition, those kinds of things. And even more specifically what the definition or a meaning is, and then where and how it's used, how it's connected to the Greek or Hebrew throughout scripture, even some cultural and historical background on the word. And then you'll notice that it just gives us a whole bunch of references about other places that it's used as saying in the Bible throughout scripture. I can keep going down and down and down. It also gives us how it's used throughout scripture and how many times it's used. So that word Amar is referenced as address or to speak to address somebody only one time. But for 2,766 times, it's the word said. So generally when we're using this information or saying, we're looking for how is it most often used to get the best use of the word in the context that it's intended to be used in.
Right, and I would, to add to that, what I'd even say is I don't even know that we are gonna use how it's most commonly used. Because every now and then, sometimes as you're reading in context, a less common use of the word is a more appropriate translation.
Yeah.
So you really just have to, you can really go into a real long deep dive, and we're not trying to do that today necessarily, but this is just to give you some understanding of what we're using. When we use all of the information that the Strong's is giving us here, historical context and the type of word it is, whether it's a preposition or a verb or a noun, its position of speech, all those types of things help us to be able to clarify, is this word being translated into the King James as accurately as it should have been, or is there maybe a better way, a better definition, or a more appropriate definition of that word? So,
And in this particular instance with this word, for the majority of the theme is still the same.
Right.
And so the opening line on it is, so Yahuwah said to Moshe, so said is what that red word was.
Yeah.
And, it's so addressed Moshe, right? So commanded Moshe, so continued, so declared, informed. Like they're still generally saying the same thing. So with that, I'll scoot back again and let you continue on as we're reading through the scripture. Let me pull up, if there's not, and where's the first one? On the screen.
Yep.
Well. All right, so said Yahuwah to Moses, see, I have made you as Elohim to Pharaoh, and Aharon, your brother, shall be your prophet. You shall speak. And then there's this pause point right here, this dash mark. And with it, we're going to look at this number here is 853. Most commonly translated but not always is it listed as this ET or ETH. And the letters here are the Hebrew letters Aleph and Tav. Sometimes there are words put here, they just kind of throw in a filler word. Sometimes it's just left blank. But the cool thing is that when we click on it and we open up the word to see what it is, the word will come up as S. But all of a sudden it'll tell you that it's not typically translated and it's just used as a direct object marker. It's an untranslatable mark of the accusative or mark of the accusative. But again, the original Hebrew word there is just Aleph Tav. And so when we recognize Messiah as Aleph Tav throughout scripture, he references to himself that he is the beginning, the first and the last. Specifically in Revelation, John had seen him in that Revelation saying, I am. They've got it in there as the Alpha and Omega, but he probably would not have been speaking Greek. He is a Hebrew. It would have been, it is, the original script was written in Greek because that was the language of the time, but Messiah was not. And he even still, were it to be that way, we would take it back to the original anyway, and it would still be the Alpha and Omega, the Aleph and the Tav. He is the first and the last. So we recognize this, interestingly, as being able to place the Aleph Tav and place the Messiah even into the first line of Genesis and throughout Scripture. And we get to be able to show you how this plays even in this run, the sentence here with knowing that this is the Aleph Tav, this is the Messiah in these markers. So let me go back again.
And or Messiah appointed.
Oh yeah, and or Messiah appointed, good
Right.
job.
Right.
So
It
it's
may not
either in reference
necessarily
directly
be
to him or something that is that.
ordained or
Right.
appointed by, or,
Right, he's, yeah, so the way I say it, and this is the reason we're going so much into this is because, like Aaron had said, there are a lot of Aleph Tavs in there. And so what does that mean? What that means is that the Father has appointed or ordained or positioned or planned for these things. And these aren't just happenstances that just happen to happen. They were put in place for a specific thing in order to fulfill the Father's plan in creation.
are you gonna take it to her?
Yes.
Still Aaron's gonna bring it to you. I think we lose somebody here, I can't see mine.
So, all right, so all that being said, now we'll go back to the slide on the PowerPoint.
Do you want me to place the Olive Tav in there first, of this first, before we scoot over so that we can see it, or do you just wanna,
What do you mean, place?
so do you want me to go back, cause you're, do you? We'll just,
I'm not sure. I don't know what you're asking.
because we've only really kind of just shown where the one, the one is, and so I just don't.
So I have it on the PowerPoint slide. I have the verse and where the Olive Tav is and what word it's connecting to. So whether they're reading out of an interlinear or a regular, any other transcript, they can see the words and that we can tell them that there's an Olive Tav that is in the Hebrew. There's that Olive Tav is assigning that word. Yes. That's right.
This is Trinity, and a while ago,
Aiden and I were reading scriptures, and he had asked if instead of saying Elohim, if you should say Olive Tom. And from my knowledge, from what I've heard you say, Olive Tom is just like a placemaker. It's just
So Elohim is a specific word
Right.
in Hebrew that refers to mighty ones.
Yes.
Aleph Tav is the actual first letter, last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That's an identifier of the Messiah, or appointed by, or purpose for.
Yes. Number for in the interlinear for Aleph Tav, I think it was it 852 or 853?
853. And
853.
sometimes you can see, like last week when we were looking at stuff, we saw that there was a Strong's number 854 because there were two
Mhm.
letters attached after the Aleph Tav that were just they were
Mm-hmm.
how do I what's the best way of saying that? They were enhancers. They were enhancers to the Aleph Tav.
Yes.
So Aleph Tav with this specific purpose of these other two letters that were attached to it. So, but for the most part, the Strong's number 853 is going to be that Olive Tav,
Yes.
and it's going to be the Messiah all the way through Scripture from the beginning to the end.
Okay.
So back to the PowerPoint presentation, as Tamara had read verses 1 through 3. If you look at verse 1, where it says as God there, the Strong's number that is above that in the interlinear is Elohim. So what Yahuwah is telling Moses is that I've made you an Elohim, which means a mighty one, or a judge, or a superlative, somebody embodying excellence. So that's what. So when Yahuwah says, I've made you as a God. I've made you an Elohim. I've made you a mighty one. I've put you in a position of judgment over Pharaoh.
Appointed you with yeah.
And then he says, and I'm going to make Aaron your prophet. And that Strong's number is 5030. And it means an inspired man, or Yahuwah's spokesman. So he says, I'm going to make you, Moses. I'm going to make you a mighty one, a judge, an authority over Pharaoh. And I'm going to make Aaron an inspired man and my spokesman for you to Pharaoh. All right. And then in verse 2 is where we see the Olive Tavs, and it says, so that Olive Tav is before all the words, and Olive Tav the sons. So those are Yahuwah appointed words and Yahuwah appointed sons. And then in verse 3, he says he will harden Pharaoh's heart. And the word there for harden is the Strong's number 7185. And that word, that 7185, means is to make him stubborn. He's going to make him stubborn or hard-willed. And then it says, so he's going to make him stubborn, and then it's an Olive Tav heart. So the father has appointed Pharaoh's heart that the word heart, Strong's number is 3820, and it means the will or the intellect. So he's appointed Pharaoh's heart to be strong-willed and to rule his thinking, have his intellect rule his heart. Right? And then Then it says, my signs and my wonders, and there's olive tags in front of the my signs and my wonders. So it's Yahuwah's appointed signs and Yahuwah's appointed wonders. And then at the end of it, it just says, in the land of Mitzrayim. And we remember that Mitzrayim means double misery, double sorrow.
Oh, no, and four. Oh, yeah, and four.
Yeah, we're not going to four yet. Next slide would be four.
Oh, sorry. I'm taking
Eh,
Egypt right here. That's right.
So then we're gonna click to the next slide. And then, so I just wanna, you know, remind you that the plagues are wonders because they're supernatural. So when he says, I'm gonna make them signs and wonders, right? The plagues are, the wonders, the plagues are wonders because they're supernatural. They're things that didn't just, happen. Yet some of these things happen naturally in nature, but not to the extent and the severity of which they happened to Egypt. These were supernatural, and they were signs. They were great signs. And all of these things that we see are going to happen again at a greater level, right? So in Revelation, it talks about the greater Exodus as Yahuwah begins to call his people back to the land again, and we migrate. We do that Exodus out of the land in which we are in now, back to that land again. As he does that, there will be. It talks about the seven seals, and those seven signs again are the great wonders, and they're going to mirror these wonders just on a much larger scale, on a worldwide scale, as opposed to isolated to the territory that Egypt occupied. So let's just go ahead. So the next reading is just going to be one verse. Serenity, if you want to read Exodus 7:4.
Excuse me. And Pharaoh is going to listen to you, and I shall lay my hand on
I
Mitzrayim.
don't think you're on the right
Yeah.
one. Exodus 7.
Exodus 7, verse 4.
Verse 4. See where you're at.
And Pharaoh is not going to listen. Yeah, I missed.
Not will he do, he will not listen to you.
I misread my friend. I don't see them there. So,
Go ahead.
and Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, and I shall lay my hand on Mitzrayim and bring my vision,
Division army.
Divisions.
my division, and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Mitzrayim by great judgment.
So in the verse there where it says will not heed, the people of Israel, and the leaders in Israel will not advise or try to show Pharaoh that he's in the wrong. And we have to remember that all kings had advisors, right? They always sought the advice and direction of how to lead their kingdoms from other people. And whether they listened to their advisors or not is another thing, but they did have them, and their advisors were constantly speaking in their ears of what to do. But in this case, Yahuwah is saying that he will not heed. So the people aren't even going to raise the voice to Pharaoh. they're not even going to try to tell him that, hey, look, you might be in the wrong here. And then we have 3 olive taves in there. And the first olive tave is before the hand. So it says that, so Pharaoh will not heed, so I may lay olive tav my hand on Egypt and bring olive tav my armies, and olive tav my people, the sons of Israel, out of the land of Egypt, by great judgments. So, what are the great judgments, right? So we got to remember that at this time, the sons of Ham had greatly perverted their ways and everyone else's ways, and established gods. And so the judgment would be on them and their gods. So I have a reference here to Genesis 15:14. Aaron, you want to go there?
Sure. But Olatab, the nation whom they serve, will judge I, and afterward they shall come out with possessions great.
So what he's saying, so this is back in the promise that Yahuwah had made to Abraham, and Abraham's asking questions about, how am I going to know that this land is mine? And at this point, Abraham doesn't even have a descendant; he doesn't even have a son. But these promises are being given to him, and so all the way back then, Yahuwah is telling him that that the nation whom they serve, I will judge. So this is the great judgment. He's already foretold this long before, 430 years prior to Israel being in Egypt at the point they're at now. 430 years prior to that, he proclaimed that he would bring them out and he would judge the nation that they served. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And we're gonna, Aiden, you get to have a
Okay.
good stretch here. We're gonna read verses 5-12, and there's not a whole lot here.
Okay.
After you read it, I'll go back in and we're going
In Exodus. All right. So 5-12. Okay. We're gonna try to aim for the interlinear this time and read out of that. So please forgive me if I butcher this up like a cow. All right. Let's begin. So Exodus 7:5. Hold on. We're going back up to 7:4 for just a second. Probably. Hold on. And shall know Egypt that I, Yahuwah, when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out Aleph Tav, the sons of Israel from among them. And so did Moses and Aaron, just as commanded Yahuwah them. Just as Yahuwah commanded them. So they did. And Moses was old, 80 years, and Aaron old of 380 years, when they spoke to Pharaoh. Is that P? What's that right there? That P
that,
and Z.
right, that E is a letter attached at the end of a thought.
Okay.
And it's a punctuation, and that means that letter, that Hebrew letter there is called a pay.
A
It
pen.
means word.
Word.
So,
Okay.
or to speak. So So it's just emphasizing, right, it's just emphasizing that what's being said here
Mhm.
is spoken word or the word of Yahuwah.
Okay. That's the 7:8. And spoke Yahuwah to Moses and Aaron, saying, when speech to you, Pharaoh, saying, show for yourselves a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take out of Tav your rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. Verse 10. So went in Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh, and they did so just as commanded Yahuwah, and cast down Aaron, Tav, his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Verse 11. But called also Pharaoh the wise men and the sorcerers, so did also they, the magicians of Egypt, with their enchantments in like manner. In 7:12, for threw down every man his rod, and they became serpents, but swallowed up the rod of Aaron, swallowed up their rods. His serpent did. So, and there's Alf Tav right there. So,
Right, so nowhere, so it's notable right there in that last verse
yes.
that when it says, or threw down every man his rod, there's no
Mhm.
olive top. So the magicians and the in verse
Yahuwah
12.
ain't with them.
So the magicians and the sorcerers, the wise men of Egypt, they had rods too, right? And they were doing things with their own sorceries, but their rods were not appointed by Yahuwah,
Yahuwah.
right? No
Yeah.
olive top in front of their rods.
And it just shows who's, sorry for interrupting, it just shows who's master, Alf Tav Yahuwah, because he ate the others. So I'm like, well, it's right. The evidence is there.
The rods of Aaron, right? Aaron's olive top rod, right?
Yes.
So I want to also go back to where was it? So in verse 10 is and if you've got the interlinear pulled up, this will be great, because verse 10 under the word that's interpreted there as the serpent is the Strong's number 8577.
Are you sure you don't mean verse 9?
Verse 9.
There's one in 11 too. There might be one in 9. I don't know.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so it doesn't matter. They're both the same.
Anyway, same number.
Yeah,
Okay.
same number. So either way, they were all interpreted as the serpent, and they're all the same strong number. But
Dragon, serpent.
right. So when you click on that 8577, it's interesting because like in the movies and Hollywood and stuff like that, just make it out to be like this, this snake, right? This
Cobra, yeah.
right, a cobra or a what is it, the other one, an ass or an asp or something like that. Just a fin, right? So because they're just these little things, right? But when you actually click on the Strong's number, we're looking at, that this actually means a dragon, a serpent, a sea monster, right? And if you go down and you look under the usage and the cultural historical background under the usage, it says the word, and help me pronounce that, tanin, tanin is used in the Bible to describe large, formidable creatures, often associated with the sea or the wilderness. It is translated variously as dragon, serpent, or sea monster. The term conveys a sense of power, majesty, often symbolizing chaos or opposition to Yahuwah's order. Right, and so, and the cultural historical background is that the Tanin was a term that resonated with the mythological creatures of surrounding cultures, such as the Babylonian Tiamat and the Canaanite Lotan. These creatures were often depicted as chaotic forces that the gods had to subdue, right? So we need to, yeah, I thought that was just interesting as we're reading that because what we're looking at is not just this little itty bitty thing, right? And now if we go all the way back to Exodus 3 and we look at it when Yahuwah first was telling Moses, he says, "What's that in your hand?" "Oh, that's a rod. Throw it on the ground," and didn't just turn into a little snake. It turned into a dragon.
Formidable beast.
Right, a formidable beast, right? So now it's even more impressive, right? When Yahuwah tells him to pick it up by its tail. Not talking about a little snake. He's grabbing a dragon by the tail, you know? So this just emphasizes the power and the authority of Yahuwah over these things that, these pagan worlds and nations would, would recognize as being formidable beasts, right?
And even if it's just like a little Komodo dragon, right? Like,
Right,
that's still a pretty big thing.
right, right. So I just thought that was just an interesting side mark there, that, and this is why it's important that we don't, this is why reading to the depth of understanding that we read to, it doesn't change the story, right? It still turns into something that's a serpent like or whatever, but it just gives so much more emphasis or so much more depth to what is really happening. We're not talking about now we've got, so imagine now we've got 3 dragons sitting here on the ground, not just these little snakes like, Charlton Heston's, the 10 Commandments movie would show, right? But we have these 3 dragons, squaring off with each other, and Aaron's dragon just swallows up the other 2. I mean, that's much more impressive than
Which
the
means that
Hollywood.
he lifted technically 3 dragons by 1 tail.
Right. And it's just so much more impressive than Hollywood's version of, Aaron's cobra biting the other 2 cobras and the other 2 cobras dying, which is still impressive, but how much more so? So anyway, we'll go off. I'll get off that sidebar there. So we'll go to the next slide. And the next slide we're going to read is going to be there. Okay. So the next verse we're going to read is going to be 7:13. And who's up next to read? Aiden, do you have, is your mom or dad there? Do they want to read?
Can you hear me all right? Okay.
Yep.
Mom and dad are dad is doing some, he's in his, they're busy at the moment. I'll just say that. Mom's not home and he's doing something at the current second in another room. So
More than fine. So I will just go back to the top of the order here and we'll start with Tamara if you want to read verse 13.
Or how fast does anybody else online want to read?
Yeah. Okay.
You're a sad baby back there.
Mm.
Oh, now you want your boy, your baby.
Yeah.
All right, 13, Exodus 7:13. And grew hard heart of Pharaoh, and not he did heed them, as he said, as had said Yahuwah.
Right. So
Word.
that last character there again is a pay, which means word. This is the spoken word. Yahuwah spoke. Yahuwah said, or like we always like to make reference to how when we were in the church, we said, "And this be the word of Yahuwah." So,
Word.
word. So, the notable things here is that, and grew hard Pharaoh's heart. And I don't think that I have this in my notes. But if we click on that number over the word heart, that 3820, this is where we're going to see that it's not necessarily his heart. I mean, it is his heart, right? Because my son Aaron now often speaks about, that the heart of a man, right, that has been changed and stuff like that. It's not necessarily the heart that's pumping blood, but it's our mind. It's what we're thinking on. It's what we're focusing on. Yes.
From a holistic perspective, where I'm driving in the word of, the Yahuwah's word into the work that I do from the naturopathic perspective, when we're looking at being tripartite beings, we're created in his image, right? Body, soul, and spirit. The soul encompasses your mind, your will, your emotions, your intellect, the who you are, the what you are. The heart of the person is the soul of a person. So even down to his very soul would have been hardened.
Right.
Right, because that is his mind, his will, his intellect. That is all of those pieces.
Right. So when we click on this, that Strong's number there, and we're looking at it, it's the heart, the feelings, the will, the intellect, the center. It's all of him. He is, and why, right? And so now we go into some of my commentary here, is that Pharaoh was humiliated. Sorry, I'm just watching these, and I can see out the window of our clinic here, and I saw it on a street, and I see these two cop cars weaving through traffic kind of erratically, and I'm like, well, what's going on here?
And
So,
there's
sorry.
stuff going on here anyway, so.
So we had a little bit of distraction. But so Pharaoh was humiliated. You gotta remember, Pharaoh viewed himself as a god, and how dare, and we spoke about this either last week or the week before, when Pharaoh was like, why should I recognize Yahuwah? Why should I recognize your Elohim? I'm an Elohim. Matter of fact, since you want to go pay homage to your Elohim, I'm just going to go ahead and increase the burdens upon you and have you worship me in your work, because I have no time for you to go worship somebody else. You're gonna worship me. So Pharaoh is humiliated when his servants, who outnumbered Moses, still were defeated. And this was a pretty strong blow. So I have lots of different scripture references here. We're gonna jump to Revelation, and I have them a little bit out of order here, and I think they're out of order on purpose. So I'm just gonna do them in
I
order.
think they might be on the.
Right.
Yes.
So Aaron, if you want to go to Revelation 12, we're gonna start
Like
first.
physically, yes,
Yeah.
please. I'd rather.
Right. Uh, we're gonna start first in chapter 12, verses 13 through 17, and then we're going to jump back to verses 7 and 9.
13. Dragon prosecutes the woman. And when saw the dragon that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had brought forth the male child. Keep going through what?
Through 17.
17. And were given to the woman and the two wings of, and were given to the woman the two wings of the eagle, Olive Tav great, so that she could fly into the wilderness, into the place of of her where she is nourished. There a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent, and cast the serpent out of the mouth of him. After the woman water as a river, so that her carried away by a flood he might cause to be, and helped the earth, the woman, and opened the earth, the mouth of it, and swallowed up the river, which had cast the dragon out of the mouth of him. And was angry the dragon with the woman, and went to make war with the rest of the children of her, Aleph Tav, keeping the commandments Aleph Tav of Yahuwah, and holding the testimony of Yahusha. And it stood upon the sand of the seas.
So, so who is the woman that is being referenced here? Kind of close, but more specifically,
Israel.
Israel, right?
Right.
Right, so Israel is the woman, right? And the son, the child that she's having, right? This dragon is trying to seek after. Who's the son? Who's the child that the woman is bearing?
Yahusha.
Yahusha, right? So let's go ahead and go back, same chapter, verse 12, go back to 7 and 9.
Real fast.
Yes,
Something I had thought of, I don't know if this attaches to anything, but when it says that the servants or the Pharaoh's magicians also made serpents with their rods. It, for some reason in my mind, it is like a picture of Hasatan, how he is the dragon, how he is the evil side of the dragon.
Right.
I don't know where I was going with that, but that was.
no, it's a good point, and we have a, I have a note kind of on that thought process right there, coming up. So your thoughts are correct. You're going to see some things coming up that are that connect that. So no, so it's a good thought for sure.
It's almost like I've heard some of this stuff before.
Yeah. All right. So what do you got in 7 through 9 there?
And there was war in Aleph Tav heaven. Aleph Tav Michael and the angels of him, Aleph Tav, warred against the dragon. And the dragon warred back, and the angels of him. And not had the strength, nor a place was found for them any longer in heaven, in Aleph Tav heaven. Through 9?
Yeah, go ahead and read one more.
And was thrown out the dragon of Tav great, the serpent Aleph Tav ancient, who is called the devil, and Aleph Tav Satan, Aleph Tav deceiving the inhabited world whole. He was thrown down to the earth, and the angels of him with him were thrown down.
So, so actually, your comment that you were making there, Serenity, is actually right on point, because this next this 7 through 9 here is referencing the dragon as the serpent, and and the dragon being Hasatan, being Satan. So these are just these are clarifying things. So who is the woman? Who is the dragon? The woman is Israel, the son is the Messiah, the dragon is Satan. Right. So then, Serenity, if you want to go to Revelation 7, chapter 7, 4 through 12.
I heard the number of those who sealed 144,000 sealed out of the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribes of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh,
Manasseh.
12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, were sealed. No. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of
Joseph.
that says
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No, you're
was too
good.
far down.
of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. After this, I looked and saw a great crowd which no one was able to count, out of all nations and tribes and people and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes.
Wait, it wasn't just 144,000 people.
Hey,
What?
go there yet?
And palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, deliverance belongs to our Elohim, who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all of the members stood around the throne, and the elders of the four living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne and worshiping Elohim, saying,
No, that's good. Oh, no, I'm sorry. One more. One more. Yeah, one more.
okay, saying, Selah, the blessing and the esteem and the wisdom and the thanksgiving and the respect
Yeah.
and the power and the might to our Elohim forever and ever.
And a whole lot of olive tops.
Yes.
All right, so the question there as we read that is that who is the offering? And that's all of the children of Israel, right? The 144,000, the 12,000 of each tribe of Israel, and there's somebody else mentioned here. Aaron, who's that? There's some other 144,000, I think one or two other people. 144,000. And where is it at? In verse 9. And after these things I looked, and a multitude, I guess it's not, I guess it's more than one or two. Multiple, great, which number. None was able
To count.
yeah, none was able to count, right? Out of every nation, tribes, and people and tongues standing before. So you know, there's this thought, there's this conception of, you know, that that only 144,000 are entering into salvation, and I would challenge that thought.
Yes. Same here.
Yeah. So
That-
go
That
ahead.
number is more like a frequency, in my opinion, of Yahuwah's people.
Yep, I think that there's a Yep, there's a lot of that. Aaron does a really good study on some things about this frequency, the frequency of 144,000 hertz. Is
Yep.
that, yeah, and what that really means and how we achieve that. And it's really cool. One of these days, I'm going to have to get him to do that again. And then there's also, I think that there's also my opinion, there's a physical marker in time that identifies 144,000. I think there's a lot of connecting pieces,
Oh, there are.
which which is definitely definitely resonates with how we read scripture. Is that one thing often means a lot of things, and it's often spoken continuously from cover to cover throughout the entire.
Yes.
Aiden, do you want to read Revelation 3?
Revelation 3, okay. 7 through 13.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Revelation 3:7. I'll stand by. I'm in the, okay, this is weird. I'm in the interlinear, so just bear with me.
No, you're good. Good. I'm impressed that you're taking an interest in trying to read out of this. It does take some. It comes with some practice for sure.
Been trying to practice. We read out of it last time, so when I was reading with Sis. So I'm like, well, I might as well stick with it. Thank you. Okay, Revelation 3:7. I'm going back to 3:6 just to see what it's saying that way. Does it just so I didn't understand the sentence? Okay, Revelation 3:7. It says in of the messenger to, and these things right, church. Okay, this is. Am I seeing this correctly?
Yeah. All right. So remember, so you're reading like you would read in the Old Testament out of Hebrew, but in the New Testament it's in Greek.
Mhm.
So we read Greek from left to right.
Okay, that got me there. I was like, wait, hold on a second. Okay, thank you so very much.
I do that too.
Okay. And to the messenger of it says in Philadelphia. Okay, to the messenger of the Philadelphia church, write these things, says the Holy One. Oh gosh, misclicked. The true. And then there's HO. There's a dash right there. Does that resembles?
That Strong's number 33588.
Yeah.
At dash point, what we've identified is that that is it's much like an olive tav, but sometimes it's olive tavs, they represent themselves. I think we've identified like 7 or 8 different. There's more than that, but what we're seeing is that how they're translated or how they're identified in the different words, they're all combinations of either the Son, the Father, the Spirit, or combinations of the two, or all three of them, or one working in accord. They're all just, but they're all they're like the olive top is that they are appointed by one or multiple parties of the three.
So it's kind of it's almost the equivalent to the Alf Tav, basically.
Yeah, you could just read it as olive top.
Okay, I'll just read it as Alf Tav then. So these things says the Holy One, the true one, Alf Tav, having the key of David, the one opening and no one will shut, and shutting, and no one will shut it, and no one opens. No one opens. I know you're, and there's TA.
Olive top.
Alf Tav, okay. Deeds. Behold, I have set before you a door have been opened, which no one is able to shut. Shut it, because little you have power, and yet you have kept my word. You have kept my Alf Tav word, and not have, and sorry, and not have denied the name of me. Behold, I give those from the synagogue of Satan, who's declaring themselves Jews to be and not are, but they lie. Behold, I will cause them that they will come and will worship before the feet of you, and they shall know that I have loved you, because you have kept the word of the patient endurance of me. Those two, comma, I also, you will keep out of the hour of the trial. Then there's a dash, so I'll say that's Aleph Tav 3588. Being about Aleph Tav being, I'm butchering this.
That's right.
Aleph Tav being about to come upon the inhabited world whole to try those dwelling upon the earth. I am coming quickly. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may take the crown of you. The one overcoming, I will make him a pillar in the temple of the God of me, and out, no, and out, no out, no not. Okay, no not shall he go anymore, and I will write upon him the name of the God of me. So God of me, should I put that as Elitav or Yahuwah, or should I just keep saying that?
Where it says God there, you can use Elohim.
Elohim,
Yeah.
okay. So the name of the Elohim and the name of the city of the Elohim, the new Jerusalem coming down, new Jerusalem Aleph Tav, coming down out of Aleph Tav, heaven from the Elohim of me and the name of me, Aleph Tav new.
So that was a
Interesting.
lot. No, that was a lot. There's that, and good job there. So just to kind of recap on what all of that means, because that's a lot to try to wrap your head around. And as you're even reading it, it's even harder to try to comprehend what you're reading as you're reading it, because you're just like, wow.
I just hope whoever comes. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I should probably raise my hand, but
Go ahead.
I don't want to. Whoever's going to be watching this recording, they're going to be like, "Where is he reading?" So, what's he reading? Where's he reading out of? If they don't know what the interlinear is, so it's going to be definitely interesting. So,
Yeah.
sorry. Continue. I
So,
apologize.
no, you're good. So the reference in my notes there about that section 7 through 13 is that those who keep the commandments will be kept from the hour of testing or trial that comes on the world. The rest of the churches go through tribulation. If they preserve, then they are like what Revelation 7, 13 through 17 had mentioned. They're the ones that are coming out. They're the multitudes that couldn't even be counted, where their robes were washed in white, and the flood is false doctrine. So, and then there's a bunch more references here in Revelation, and I think just for purposes of time, we're going to go ahead and skip some of those things. But if you wanted to write those references down and look at them at another time, you might be asking yourself, well, I thought we were reading in Exodus. Why are we in Revelation?
Because it ties in with each book. Each book ties.
Right, because it's Exodus is what happened in the past. Revelation is what's going to happen in the future. So Revelation is applies to us and future generations, whereas Exodus applies to our past history and past history and generations. So the other scripture references here that it's outlining in Revelation what it's going to what it's going to talk about is that during the millennial reign, when the Messiah comes back, the Messiah binds up Satan, and he binds up deception, he binds up lies and temptations for 1,000 years. So during that reign, while the Messiah is here on earth with us, we won't have the burden of trying to whittle through the lies and the deception that the enemy has tried to impose upon us for our entire lives. So it'll be easier to see, but it'll also, with that, we'll also have a greater responsibility because there won't be any excuses. We won't be able to say, like Eve said, oh, well, it was the serpent's fault. No, it's not the serpent's fault. It's your choice. So, all right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. Let me slide over here so I can change the slide on this computer. All right. And the next slide is a continuation of this verse, and it's just more notes that I have here. And this is speaking to your comment that you made earlier, Serenity, is that all of Egypt's power is from Satan. And it was symbolized by snakes and everything. So throughout Egypt, they had images of snakes and carvings and hieroglyphs and stuff like that, depicting snakes. So Moses is showing Yahuwah has power over Satan by swallowing up their snakes. His truth is higher, and his doctrine is sound. He has sound doctrine. All the 7 churches in Revelations think they have truth. How many, that's how true is that today, right? Is that we all think we have truth. And and I include myself in this, right? Is that we all think that we have truth. The reality is that there's only one church that will not be going through tribulation, and that's the Church of Philadelphia. There are a lot of us that are going to have to experience tribulation, because we don't have the truth that we think we have, right? We have some good doctrine, and we might have a lot of good doctrine, and we might be obedient, and we might be doing all the right, but we're misguided in some things. We have some deceptions. And again, I include myself in this context. I'm not trying to say that I am without error. It's, and being in error is not necessarily a judgment of being cast into the lake of fire, right? We all are working out our salvation to try to find the truth, and the Father is pouring into us understanding and truths as we are able to receive, accept, and understand them. 10, 15 years ago, you would have tried to tell me some of this stuff. There's no way I would have heard you. 10 years ago, I might have heard you a little bit, but I wouldn't have had any understanding. 5 years ago, I was just barely starting to understand some of this stuff, but it was coming at me in such a rapid fashion that if I were to have gotten full understanding all at once, my head would have exploded. Might have exploded. Yeah, and it did explode anyway, right? So the Father, in his wisdom and his kindness and his gentleness, his mercy and his grace, gives it to us in stages that we can accept. And some of us, and again, myself included, some of us get to certain points in certain areas where we no longer have the capacity to understand anymore. And this is how merciful the Father is that, you know, this is not scriptural, but it's used a lot, and it's a principle where Yahuwah, you know, gives us what we can handle, right? Sometimes it's interpreted as Yahuwah will never give us more than we can handle. And I don't think that that's the case, because I think often he gives us more than we can handle so that we lean on him to be able to handle what's being given to us, right? But those are, a lot of those things are physical in nature, emotional in nature. Um, when it comes to spiritual things, he's not trying to blow up our spirituality. You know, so he's not going to give us more than our spirit can handle. You know, um, he may give us more than we can handle physically, so he can strengthen us spiritually. If that makes any sense. So, he's been pushing it there. Right.
Daddy, take your book.
Yeah. So back to my notes here. So Philadelphia, so all these other churches except for Philadelphia are going to go through tribulation. Why not Philadelphia? What does Philadelphia represent that the other churches don't? Well,
I would have to read it. I wasn't there. when we went
Okay.
through it. What
All right.
verse is that?
well, so this verse just talks about Philadelphia, but it doesn't necessarily explain who Philadelphia is. So Philadelphia is so in the beginning of Revelation, it talks about the seven churches. This is a letter to the seven churches, right? This is a revelation this is a revelation to John, written by John to the seven churches, right? So the seven churches aren't actual physical structures of buildings that have congregations of people in them. They represent the types of people, the types of believers. So the Church of Philadelphia, um, you know, the body of believers that belong to Philadelphia are those that have uh, sound doctrine, true doctrine, from the time that they are born to the time that they die. So now that doesn't mean that they walk perfectly, because you know, is it Romans or Hebrews that says no, you know, we all fall short of the glory, right? Um, so none of us will walk a perfect life. There's only been one person who's ever done that, and that was the Messiah. Um, so we will all fall short. But as far as doctrine goes, you know, and what they follow, the Church of Philadelphia has sound doctrine, and they, you know, so they keep the feast, they keep the Sabbaths, they, you know, they do things according to the Ketubah, according to the Moab covenant, you know, they obey the commands, right? So the Messiah says, if you love me, you'll follow my commands. This is the Church of Philadelphia, that the Church of Philadelphia followed his commands um, all the way through. Even through their stumbling, you know, they recognize their stumbling, and they strive to move forward and go and do better. So that's the Church of Philadelphia. That's why they don't experience tribulation, because they had sound doctrine from the beginning to the end of their lifespans. Um, so another note here, it says that even those that have died, you know, and are sleeping right now, even they will have to experience tribulation, right? It's not, um, you know, unless they are part of the Church of Philadelphia. So, um, so I have some more scripture references here in my notes. I think I'm gonna go ahead and again, for time's sake, we're gonna go ahead and kind of pass over some of those notes. But if you wanted to, if you wanted to write some of those things down, those would give you scriptural references to what we're talking about, so that you would be able to verify or read for yourself what I'm saying about Philadelphia, and am I right in my assessment or am I wrong in my assessment? These verses here are going to give you some context
Being
to that stuff.
different perspective.
What's that?
Not about being right or wrong. Just
Right.
different perspective.
There you go, different perspective. Thank you. All right, so the and I don't even think my last note in here is about the Great Tribulation, and I have scripture references there in Daniel, Matthew, Jeremiah, Zechariah. Again, I think we're gonna go ahead and table those for another time, another deeper dive and discussion. But if you wanted to know more about what the Great Tribulation means, what it represents, what points to it, those 4 scripture verses there give you some good context. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide.
Are you
Let me
recording?
get- Let me get a,
And recording.
we are too.
Things.
Yeah, so we got 240. We're still not quite out of 7 yet. So, see where we at. Aiden read last, so Tamara, if you want to read 7:15, Exodus chapter 7, verse 15.
Only 15.
Yes.
Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes out to the water, and you shall stand by the river's bank to meet him. And take in your hand the rod which was turned into a serpent.
So, so this is so he's commanding Moses to go out and meet Pharaoh at the river. So just for context, and this is so we can get a historical reference and really kind of establish a time of the year, that things are happening right now, because this is pertinent and it's interesting, and it's something that's not necessarily often discussed, but Yehud does things at times for a reason. And right, and it's not just he's not just this willy-nilly Elohim up there that's just shooting from the hip, right? He's foretold and preordained these things. So this may be a ceremonial event that Pharaoh went to in order to worship. The annual flooding of the Nile was referred to as the arrival of Happy. It was celebrated with great festivals and river processions. Every year, people would travel to his shrines, Pharaoh's shrines. This may be why Moses was able to confront Pharaoh in his palace the day before, with everyone bringing gifts and prayers. So the palace was open. People were coming in and out, and Moses would have just been part of the crowd, right? This set the calendar in fall for Egypt. So all the sons of Ham, and for all the sons of Ham. And again, that reference there, the sons of Ham, is that this Pharaoh is descended from Ham. Ham is one of the sons of Noah. Ham is the son of Noah that didn't walk in the ways of his father. So all the descendants of Ham adopted, accepted, and embraced polytheistic religions and multiple gods and things like that, right? So these are the descendants. This Pharaoh is a descendant of Ham. the descendant, or I'm sorry, the Pharaoh that was in Egypt when Joseph came in, well, I'm sorry, I keep butchering this. I keep saying the wrong names. Let me restate this again. The Pharaoh that was the sovereign over Egypt when Joseph was sold into Egypt and brought his family Israel into Egypt with him, that Pharaoh is a descendant of Shem. Shem is another son of Noah, and Shem was actually recognized as the Melchizedek priest that visited Abraham. So this is Shem that this is a descendant, that Pharaoh was a descendant of Shem. So that Pharaoh, even though that Pharaoh had began to embrace polytheistic religions, God, a religion of multiple gods, he recognized and understood who Yahuwah was. So when Joseph came in and he recognized Joseph as being a Hebrew, and the Elohim of Joseph giving Joseph the ability to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, he recognized that and he established Joseph to be in that power center of Egypt.
Yes, God is using us.
So that's where I'm making these references to Egypt and Ham, is that there were two different sovereigns in Egypt. While Joseph was there, a sovereign that recognized who Yahuwah was, and now that Joseph's dead, the Pharaoh that's the sovereign of Egypt now does not recognize who Yahuwah is, and matter of fact is in great opposition to it. And as we had noted earlier in Exodus, even says, "Who is this Yahuwah you speak of? And why should I even consider him?" Right? So, so back to my notes here. So this would fit why Moshe was feeding Jethro's sheep at a high elevation, grazing in the fields at Mount Sinai in the cooler weather. So all the timing is fitting, right? Is that this is why Moses was able to see the burning bush at Mount Sinai. It was higher elevation. He had the sheep up higher because the lower lands didn't have, the grass wasn't, it was dead because we were getting ready to go into winter, right? So, so we're in fall time. And this says July 19th was their new year, Egypt's new year, and the arrival of Happy. Happy is I believe is the Nile god, right?
Yep.
Of Egypt. And
I'm quickly reading through some of this, it would have been wheat, then barley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would have, if wheat's first, that would have been summer, so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, right, so we're coming out of summer into fall, right? So, and the Egyptian calendar had 365 days and consisted of 13 months, and it was based on the sun. And the Hebrew priests, had a calendar that was based on a solar lunar calendar, and this is kind of causes some discord and some disagreement. But the priestly order, the priests actually were very in tune to a lunar schedule. They tracked a lot of their things through a lunar schedule. And if we go back to creation, where it says the sun, the moon, and the stars were all placed in the firmament to be able to give us, to be able to determine our years, our seasons, our months, and our feasts. And so, So it's, some people want to just say that, oh, you can't look into the moon at all. Well, no, the moon has a place. And you can't follow any one of those independently of the others. They all play a part and they all have to speak to each other in their positions and in their purposes. So, Yahuwah showed in his first sign of the snakes and destroying the highest, most important holiday when the whole world would have been there in Egypt. And and they had no water. I think I'm ahead of myself in my notes because we haven't the next plague is talking about we don't have water. Because we've only looked at the snakes yet, right? We haven't looked at the second plague yet.
And though I was just about to ask, because this is where some of my confusion comes, this is before, this would still have to be in what we call March or early April, potentially. Is that right? Or it would have taken years for all of this stuff to go through anyway. Okay.
Right.
So part of the reason that I'm asking is because this is in the first part of July as I'm researching when the Niles would have flooded it, because I was thinking that it probably would have lasted longer. They start flooding in April and go through September. So the height of it would have been in July at their new year, or what we call July, at their new year.
Right.
So that's, I'm just trying to, some of this stuff is new for me, which is cool. So I'm just kind of sitting here doing some research.
Yeah,
on
no,
my
and-
own, but I've just been starting to bring some question. But it dawned on me that it took a long time for these
plagues, right?
plagues to go through. This was not just like a series of a couple of days. It was
Right. It wasn't back to back to back, and the whole thing spanned over 2-week period of time, right? This
Right.
was this took
potentially months and years and the
months
and years in the making.
months and years, not years, but weeks and months for each plague. So the plagues started, and their new year happens after the flooding of the Nile, and they bring Happy in because Happy's the god of the Nile, and he brings the waters back within the banks of the Nile.
So that's
Right.
so it starts in April.
Right.
So the height of their New Year's in July. It ends in September.
Right.
So it would make sense that they would be praising him at its most full peak, and then he would, the god, he would bring in bring the waters back, would narrow the waters back out again after that.
And also, so Happy was also recognized as being the god of barley and beer, which is going to be.
The barley is earlier, it's April.
Well, no, it's just, but the next thing that's going to happen is against the Nile, and it affects the next harvest that's coming. So barley doesn't get planted until late in the season, until winter, right? So it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to be affected, and it's a direct attack or assault against one of Egypt's gods, Happy. All right, so the next slide we're looking at, we're going to read verses 16 through 19. And where are we at in our order? Let's turn. All right, so Aaron, if you want to read
7:16.
7:16 through 19.
And you shall say to him, Yahuwah, Elohim of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, let go all of Tav, my people, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But indeed not you would hear until now. Thus says Yahuwah, by this you shall know that I am Yahuwah. Behold, I will strike with the rod that is my right hand, that is in my hand, all of Tav, the waters, which are in the Nile, and they shall be turned to blood. and the fish that are in the Nile shall die and shall stink. The Nile will loathe Egypt to drink the water of the Nile. Return to the law. And spoke to Yahuwah, and spoke Yahuwah to Moshe, saying to Aaron, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their streams, over their rivers, and over their ponds, and over all their pools of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, and both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone, and did so.
All right, so, all right, so, did I only have, was there only one olive top in there? I don't know if I missed other
I think
ones.
there was two.
So the one olive top that I caught in there was in verse 16, and it was about the people, you're gonna let olive tops people go, you're gonna let Yahuwah's appointed people go. The end of verse 18 ends in a shemek, which means to slowly turn back to the law. And so it's a command again, as he's saying these things, as he's doing these things, he's forcing, those to turn back to the law, to the understanding. So, so this plague is a, it's an attack against one of Egypt's other gods, and it's Hatmahit. How do you say that? Hatmihit? Hatmit? I don't know.
The fish god of Egypt.
Hatmiet, I like Hatmiet, we'll go with that.
That's how we hit.
Yeah.
Happen yet?
Hatmiet, all right, and so Hatmiet relates to the fish of the year. And believe it or not, Hatmiet is the goddess of scents in the center of perfume processing and the trade, perfume processing trade in the world. So in the Middle and New Kingdom periods, eating fish was very important to life, but in the early kingdoms, it was taboo because most fish were unclean that were in the Nile. So, didn't realize that. Yeah. So, so this is,
Necessarily. Neither here nor.
all right. So, and in verse 19, we have, a reference to Aaron and stretching out his hands over the streams and over the Egypt, right? And so there's witnesses that that are notable through these events, right? So the two witnesses here in Exodus 7 is Moses and Aaron, and again, for time's sake, we won't go to Revelation, but in Revelation 11, chapter 11, verses 3 through 13, the two witnesses are Elijah and Enoch. So the two witnesses here in this Exodus that we're speaking about coming out of Egypt is Moses and Aaron. And in the greater Exodus, we'll have two witnesses of Elijah and Enoch. I have a note here on Hebrews 9:27. Hebrews 9:27 says it's appointed for men once to die, but after this there's judgment. And so the reason I bring that up is that Elijah and Enoch both did not taste death. Enoch was brought up to Yahuwah, and Elijah was carried off in his chariot to the heavens. So So in Revelation, it talks about these witnesses that come back during tribulation, and um, and speculation is that it's probably going to be Elijah and Enoch, because they haven't died yet, and in the tribulation they'll be martyred, and they will die for their faith, and then there will be judgment. So so they have to come, they have to come back and die. It's just, that's what's appointed for man to do. Right? And then the sign of the blood, um, here in this Exodus has references in Revelation to the greater sign that will come with the greater Exodus. And again, we won't go to those verses for sake of time today, but if you wanted to take a snapshot of that, write those down to be able to look at for yourself at a later time. Those are all interesting studies, and it connects what happened then to what's going to happen in the future. Go ahead and go to the next slide, which is going to be the end of this chapter. It's going to be Exodus 7:20 through 25. Aiden, if you wanna jump in there and
Absolutely. So 7:20 through 25. Hold on just a second. Okay, we're at 7:20. All right. Exodus 7, verse 20 through 25. And did so, Moses and Aaron, just as Yahweh Yahuwah commanded. So he lifted up the rod and struck the waters that were in the Nile, in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and were turned all and all the waters turned to blood that were in the Nile. And the fish that were in the Nile died and stank. The Nile and not could Egypt drink the water of the Nile, so there was blood throughout all the land. And did so the magicians of Egypt with their enchantments, and grew hard, with their enchantments and grew hearted. Excuse me, I'm sorry. With their enchantments and grew hard, the heart of Pharaoh, and not he did heed them, as had said Yahuwah. Oh boy, this is getting interesting.
you're doing good.
And turned Pharaoh and went into his house, and neither was moved. So he wasn't moved when he returned back to his house. His heart also by this, so he wasn't moved. Verse 24. So dug all Egypt all around the Nile for water to drink, not because they could drink the water of the Nile. So wait. And passed 7 days after had struck Yahuwah out 853. That's Aleph Tav. Yep. The river. So I think that goes again Aleph Tav. All right.
The 853 is an olive top of the river.
Yes.
And then in pay, which is the word.
Yes.
Right? So,
okay. Butchered that.
You did fine. So some olive tops through there. So in verse 20, there's an olive top of the waters. So Yahuwah appointed these waters to become blood, to stink, to be undrinkable. And in verse 23, where it says that Pharaoh entered into his house, that word there that is interpreted as his house has a Strong's number of 1004, so 1004. It actually means his temple. So he comes back into his temple, right? And You know, because remember, this is a spiritual war, right? This is Yahuwah laying siege to Egypt's polytheistic religion of all their gods, and showing that he has power over them. And then I think as you know, this is where that note that I had in the last slide there was talking about. So all the people started digging around the Nile to try to find water. We're not just talking about the Israelites. We're not just talking about the Egyptians, but we're talking about all these other people from all the other 70 nations that were here at this time of year, and there was no water to be had. In one of the other verses that it talks about, it says that it said even in your basins, in your clay jars, in your stuff, all of the water turned to blood. So not a good time. Not a good time for Egypt. All right, so that concludes 7. We'll move on here to Exodus 8. It's 3 o'clock. I don't know how far we'll get into here. We'll try to cruise through chapter 8 here if we can. And so we'll go to the next slide, which is we've got that, and then you've got commentary. So go to the next slide. If you want to read verses 1 and 2.
And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus said Yahuwah, let my people go, so that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, see, I am smiting all your border with frogs.
So take a quick break here. My son and daughter-in-law and grandbaby are taking off, so I'm gonna give some hugs here as they walk out.
Yeah.
Love you, Dad.
See you this week. Thanks. That's all. Good day, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom to you.
Love that baby for me.
See you all.
All right, so in verse 1, there's an olive tav there for olive tav, my people. And in verse 12, there's an olive tav for all. So here, my hair. Verse 2, if you refuse, I will smite all the territory. So olive tav, all the territory with frogs. So again, we're not talking about it was common during the flooding of the Nile and the drying out of the Nile. One of the reasons why, and let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me go ahead first to my thought or my notes here. So it's in ancient Egypt, frogs were associated with fertility and considered sacred, particularly linked to the goddess of Heget, who was depicted as a frog or a woman with a frog's head. The plague of frogs, therefore, was not only a physical nuisance, but also a direct challenge to the Egyptian religious system and their deities. This plague demonstrated the power of the Elohim of Israel over the gods of Egypt, emphasizing his sovereignty and authority. Heget was also associated with creation, midwifery, and the germination of barley. So we keep having a theme here, right? So, so the reason the frogs were this goddess had come to be is because when the Nile would flood and then the Nile would all but dry up at other parts of the year, right? And during these parts of the year when the Nile was very low and almost dry, when the water would come back into it again, the frogs would appear because the frogs lay dormant, right? And we experience that in life here is that all of a sudden you get you get some dry spells and stuff like that, and you start getting some rain, and the puddles sit there for a little while, and all of a sudden you start to see tadpoles, and you got frogs coming out, right? Because the seeds of the frogs, the eggs of the frogs and stuff like that, lay dormant in the dry soil. So this is why it was connected to to um, to fertility and things like that. Is that it was recognized that these frogs, would have the ability to bring life out of the dryness of the Nile, right? So and also connected with midwifery and things like that. It's going to be interesting because we didn't read it here, but I think we're going to read in the next few verses that who is so intentional. Where these frogs end up is just emphasizes the challenge and the authority over this Egyptian god of the frogs, right? So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to get verses 3 through 8. And you're going to be up again there, Aiden, if you would like to read.
Sure. Exodus 8, 3 through 9. Okay. We're going to the interlinear once more. Exodus 8, 3. So shall bring forth abundantly the Nile frogs, and which shall go up and come into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and into the houses of your servants and on your people and into your ovens and into your kneading bowls and on you and on your people and on all your servants shall come up the frogs. And spoke Yahuwah to Moses, saying to say to Aaron, stretch out Aleph Tav, your hand with your rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause to come up Aleph Tav, frogs on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and came up the frogs, and covered Aleph Tav, the land of Egypt. Exodus 8, 7. And did so the magicians with their enchantments, and brought up Aleph. Hold on a second. And did so the magicians with their enchantments, and brought up. There's an Aleph Tav there. Frogs on the land of Egypt. And called Pharaoh for Moses. So Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, and treat Aleph Tav Yahuwah, that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let Aleph Tav, the people, that they may sacrifice to Yahuwah. And said Moses to Pharaoh, accept the honor of saying, okay, let me say that again. Accept the honor of saying over me, when I shall intercede for you, for your servants, for your people, to destroy the frogs from you and your houses, only in the Nile, that they may remain.
All right, so there's a lot. So there's a lot in there.
A lot of Aleph.
Yeah, on Aleph Tavs, and in verse 3, again, they had that word that's in your house.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Strong's number of the temple, and then and in your bedroom. So again, the frogs were and Heget, the goddess of the frogs, right? Were represented fertility, and Yahuwah was making a mockery of their false god here. And he's like, I'm going to put them in your bed. I'm going to put them, in your bedrooms, and it's just you think that you like them, you think that you want them, Well, I'm just gonna make it so ridiculously overbearing for
Over.
you that, right, that you're gonna see you have no authority over these
That's kind of funny. That's how you get someone's attention for sure.
Right, and it's all of the land, right? I mean, it's, I mean, we're not just talking about just like in the inner city gates and stuff like that, but all throughout
Oh.
Egypt. And you remember that Egypt spanned a huge territory.
You can't. And some of these frogs are quite poisonous. I found. I've heard. So they're. Yeah.
It wasn't, it wasn't a good time for sure, So lots of olive tops in there. Um, you did a pretty good job reading out of the interlinear, so I don't need to go back and reiterate all those. But in verse 8, I wanna pinpoint a couple words in here. If you want to pull up the interlinear on this, so that we can look at a couple words here. Exodus 8, verse 8. So we're gonna go to, you get your pointer up there, we're gonna go to the word entreat. Go to that Strong's number 6279. This is Pharaoh, right? So it says, and called Pharaoh for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat Olive Tav. Or no, I'm sorry, that's not an Olive Tav. Entreat El Yahuwah. So that word entreat, if we click on the 6279, Pharaoh's asking Moses and Aaron to pray to their Elohim. Just a few chapters ago, Pharaoh was like, who is this Yahuwah that you speak of? And why should I acknowledge him? And now he's asking him, he's like, hey, so,
But not even to pray, to entreat and
and
supplicate.
supplicate, right? To give him, I'm glad you, yeah, I mean, to entreat, to pray, to
Burn incense
right,
and
to
worship.
worship, to
to
intercede for me, right? Ask your Elohim to do something for me, please, right? So it appears as if he's humbling himself almost. But we'll see here in a minute that that's not necessarily the case. And this is what I think is awesome of Moses right here, is what is Moses's response? As we go to verse 9, it says, and said Moses to Pharaoh, accept the honor of saying, well, that sounds pretty pleasant, right? Let's go ahead and click on what that 62.
Catching up. And said Moses, accept the honor of saying,
Right. We're just, so that accept the honor of saying.
Oh, okay.
So, and Moses said to Pharaoh, accept the honor of saying. That sounds pretty pleasant and pretty cordial, right? But when we click on the actual word, what Moses is actually telling Pharaoh to do, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do this for you, but you're going to glorify the name. You're going to boast and claim and embellish the name of Yahuwah.
And explain, and
Right.
like shake a tree,
Right,
you're
right.
like,
Sell it to the people.
the mighty one and shake it?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
It
so
says-
scared you're praying.
I'll go ahead. Say that again.
You're so scared you're praying and you're selling it like crazy.
Right. He's like, yeah, I'll go pray to Elohim for you, but you're gonna do this. You're gonna acknowledge it. You're going to, pay the tribute and the honor and the glory. You're gonna give. You're gonna adorn yourself to our Elohim. And And then, and then he says, if, and if you do that, then yes, I will pray and I will supplicate for you. So, and again, this is where it's just so much, it's just so much more, gets so much more depth when you read to this level, because the story, it doesn't change the story, but Moses isn't just cordially speaking with Pharaoh here. He's acknowledging, well, now you want to acknowledge my Elohim. Okay, well, if you want to acknowledge him and you want something from him, then this is what I require. You must, acknowledge him. You must honor him, adore, and grab hold of him and glorify him, if this is what you want. So then we go to the next slide, which can be next slides are going to be verses 10 through 18. And we're down to just two readers here, Tamara and Aiden, and Aiden just read. So Tamara, you're going to be up reading verses 10 through 18.
So he said tomorrow, and he said, let it be according to your word, so that you know that there is no one like Yahuwah our Elohim. And the frogs shall turn aside from you and from your houses and from your servants and from your people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moshe and Aharon went out from Pharaoh. And Moshe cried out to Yahuwah concerning the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And Yahuwah did according to the word of Moshe. And the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. I'm reading too low, I'm sorry.
You're going to go all the way to 18. Okay.
When Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not listen to them as Yahuwah had said. And Yahuwah said to Moses, say to Aharon, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land so that it becomes gnats in all of the land of Mitzrayim. And they did so. And Aharon stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, that it became gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the land became gnats in all of the land of Mitzrayim. And the magicians did similarly with their magic to bring forth gnats, but they were unable. And there were gnats on man and beast.
All right, so a lot of olive tovs in there, olive tovs to the heart, to the rod, to the dust, to the hand, even olive tovs. So my translation says lice instead of gnats. Gnats, lice. And so after the relief of the frogs, right? Pharaoh's heart hardened again. His will, his intellect, he refused, and the end of that verse in 15 ends in a shemek, which is slowly turned back to the law, and Pharaoh refused to do so, right? Pharaoh in the depths of the core of his being just decided to be stubborn. So this plague is a challenge against the Egyptian god Geb, and Geb is the god of earth, and see, I don't have this in my notes here, but he was maybe it was the next. No, I'm sorry, I'm mixing it up with the next god. So he was so Geb is the god of the earth. So this is why, Yahuwah commanded Aaron to strike the ground, strike the earth, and the very dust that came up from the ground were turned into lice, right? So just imagine that all the different particles of dust as they're floating up now become lice, and all the dust of the ground, all the dust of Egypt has become lice, right? So So lice were hard to kill. They caused irritation and caused diseases. This plague was an affront to Egypt's religious leaders because they went to great lengths to keep themselves clean and pure, and this would have just struck them at the core of their faith. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the next slide. And we're going to read verses 21 and 22. Aiden, if you want to take those.
Verses 21 through 22 in Exodus 8. I accidentally read ahead of everybody, so I'm going to backtrack real quick. Exodus 8:20. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay. Yours is, I'm kind of, you guys have the ability to scroll. I have to keep clicking the arrow keys. So
You can, before you click the arrow keys, if you right at the top of, here, let me go up to the top of mine because you can fix it. So where it says Exodus 8 at the top of your page right there,
yes.
your little thing that says click for chapter.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Okay, now I can actually scroll. That'll make my life so much easier.
Tell you what, man, my son found that for us because we used to do the same thing you're doing right now, and it just made it so hard to try to read through here. And then one day he's like, "Well, just click on for the chapter." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah. Thank you so very much. Okay, fourth plague, flies, and then looks like the verse numbers. Okay, we're reading 20 through 22.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And said Yahuwah to Moses, "Rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water, and say to him, Thus says Yahuwah, let my people go, that they may serve me, or else if you will not let go of my people, behold, I will send on you and your servants and on your people, and into your houses swarms of flies, and shall be full, and the houses shall be full in Egypt of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they are, Aleph Tav. And then I will set up apart in, okay, verse 22, and I will set apart in day that Yahuwah, that Aleph Tav, sorry, the land of Goshen which my people dwell in, that not shall be there swarms of flies, in order that you may know that I, Yahuwah, am in the midst of the land. And we'll stop there as those are 23.
Yeah, we'll stop there. All right, so so again, you read the Olive Tovs in there, so no sense to go into that. This is the first plague that Israel doesn't experience. So Israel experienced they experienced the blood, they experienced the frogs, they experienced the gnats or the lice. Right? This plague of the flies they didn't experience, and Yahuwah specifically says that he's not going to, that his people won't be affected by this, so that there will be a differentiation. I'm
Okay.
separating now. Now I am. My people had to experience the first couple because they had to see my power.
They had to wake up.
That's right. They had to wake up, and they had to. What we read last week is that they had to experience their time in Egypt had to get a little harder in order for them to desire something different than what they had become so accustomed to. They got comfortable in their slavery. They got comfortable in their burdens. They got comfortable in the lowly places that they had ended up being in. And what a what I can't think of how I want to say this, but we're us as believers today are in the same places. We talked about last week how Yahuwah was explaining the greatness of the names of the children of Israel, right? And that, you know, they were such a great people, and they should take, you know, they should take ownership of their identity, right? And we talked about how often we just don't recognize ourselves as being that chosen people. This world makes us feel like we have to walk around with our head down low, and we can't speak and we can't do anything because, you know, we're supposed to be meek, right? The meek shall inherit the earth. And but that's not what he's telling us to do. We are a set apart royal priesthood of people, you know, um, and we would do ourselves great benefits if we, and when I say we, I include myself in this, you know, if we would really take hold of our identities and really step into the fullness of what that means, you know, this world would begin to shudder, you know, under the chosen people of our Father beginning to step into their identities. Um, so, um, so he's making a separation, you know, here. He's like, my people aren't going to do it, and the reason, and he mentions here the land of Goshen in verse 22, right? And it's the Olive Tav land of Goshen. And if we go back to Genesis chapter 45, 9 through 10, when Joseph was telling his brothers to go back and get his father, and they came back, and he says, look, I'm setting aside for you guys, you know, this territory, this area called Goshen here in Egypt. And it was actually the wealthiest, you know, it was the gated community of Egypt. You know, it's where all the, you know, it's where all the best parts of the land were. And this is where uh, Joseph established, you know, the nation of Israel in Egypt, is in the best places of the land. So this plague, the plague of the flies, the swarms of flies, is a challenge to the Egyptian god of Kefri. How you say that? Kefri, maybe. Um, and so this god is associated with insects, includes flies, and is targeted by the fourth plague. Kefri was the god of creation. Of Kefri was the god of creation, rebirth, and the movement of the sun. He's often depicted as a scarab beetle, which symbolizes rebirth and the morning sun. The plague of flies was a perversion of the scarab's symbolic protection. The flies filled the land with disorder and nuisance, making life impossible across the country. The plague of flies symbolizes that the true power over life and order belongs to the Elohim of Israel, not Kefri. So, so I think that's about all I have really in that. Go to the next slide, which is actually our last slide of this chapter. I'm actually doing pretty good on time this week.
Because I just kept it on the earlier, because we were just backing.
So Tamara, you just read, right? Or did Aiden just read?
Just read.
Aiden just read, all right. So you want to finish this out with verses 23 through 32.
And I shall put a distinction between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. And Yahuwah did so, and thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Mitzrayim, and the land was ruined because of the swarms of flies. Pharaoh then called for Moshe and Aharon and said, "Go slaughter to your Elohim in the land." And Moshe said, "It is not right to do so, for we would be slaughtering the abomination of the Mitzrites to Yahuwah, our Elohim." See, if we slaughter the abomination of the Mitzrites before their eyes, would they not stone us? Let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, then we shall slaughter to Yahuwah our Elohim as he commands us. And Pharaoh said, "I am letting you go, then you shall slaughter to Yahuwah your Elohim in the wilderness. Only do not go very far away. Pray for me." And Moshe said, "See, when I leave you, I shall pray to Yahuwah, and tomorrow the swarms of flies shall depart from Pharaoh and from his servants and from his people. But do not let Pharaoh again deceive. Do not let the people go to let me say that again. But do not let Pharaoh again deceive, not to let the people go to slaughter to Yahuwah." And Moshe went out from Pharaoh and prayed to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah did according to the word of Moshe, and removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time too, and did not let the people go.
And then it ends in a pay again, which is the word of Yahuwah. And so, so this is that tug of war match between Moses and Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's saying, okay, go ahead and go pray to your Elohim again, that he may relieve us from these flies. And Moses is, he says, and then you can sacrifice, then you can do a slaughter to your Elohim. And Moses is like, no, that would be an abomination if we were to take the unclean things that are here in this land right now and make an offering to Yahuwah in your land within your gates. It would be an abomination. And also, if we did that in the sight of your people, wouldn't they? And I might have missed it in your reading there, but it says that here. Please proceed. Oh, so in verse 26, it says that if we sacrifice the olive top abomination of Egypt before their eyes, before your people, before the Egyptian people, then not will they stone us? So he's trying to tell Pharaoh, he's like, no, we can't do this here. We can't do, a sacrifice to our Elohim, within your gates and in your city and around your people and stuff like that. It would be an abomination to our Elohim, and your own people would strike out against us for doing so. So let us go 3 days into the wilderness that we can do this. And Pharaoh tries to negotiate with him. It's like, you can do it, but don't go so far. You don't need to go 3 days, and Moshe goes and he prays to Elohim, and Elohim takes away the flies, that not one would remain. Can you imagine? In July, with the banks of the Nile being full, right? Not having one fly. It's a miracle to have the swarms of flies, and then it's another miracle to not have one.
Right, and even still, these things that were to not even have one of left to remain even afterwards, you just gotta wonder kind of what it did to the ecosystem as a whole, because I mean, they were still all, part of the ecosystem, they wouldn't be there. It's just kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And you also have to, prior to that, right, you had the fish dying, you had the frogs dying, You know, and this is what the gnats and the flies would have been feeding off of and laying their larvae in and all those types of things, right? Um, but he dried it all up. He dried it all up, got rid of it all. And Pharaoh hardened his heart again. He resolved his intellect, he resolved his will to the centermost part of his being that he would not let people go. So, so that wraps up this week's study with 7 and 8. Next week, we hope to be able to get to 9 and 10. And then we will be leading into our week of Passover, which is in Exodus 11 and 12. And we should be able to start walking the rest of the way through Exodus, and it takes us through a journey with Israel through the land, uh, through the wilderness, and it gives us a day by day accounting of their walkings and their travelings, and it allows us to be able to line up all of our appointed times and our feast days according to Israel and Yahuwah's commands. Um, so, so that being said, we have next week we recognize as being the beginning of the Hebrew New Year. You know, there are other people that follow other calendars and other dates. This happens to be the date that we believe the Hebrew calendar starts on. This year marks um, a, a feast that is described in several places in Scripture, but specifically in Deuteronomy 26, it talks about a 3-year tithe, and this marks a 3-year event, and it uh, is identified by a relational event that happens with the sun and the moon in the skies. We see it over a 2-day period, and it happens every 3 years, and it doesn't happen anytime between there. It's just every 3 years on this date um, that marks the 3-year, and that's what gives us confidence in the beginning of the year starting at this time. So we will be doing some live videos and streaming and stuff like that, some live Zooms from a a location where we can have view of the horizons, be able to see that and be able to show that. So we have the links available if you're interested in having a link to the live Zooms. Let us know and we can provide those for you. I'm going to go ahead and close in prayer, and then we'll start. So, Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this time that we've been able to come together and be able to read your word. And I thank you for the ability to be able to see some um, some depths of the story that we may have not seen before, to be able to see the greatness and the sovereignty and the your authority and rule over just all things, right? To be able to show your hand and your strength, and we just thank you for this picture and what you brought Israel through in Egypt, and in the way that you're bringing them out, and you're stating to Israel that you love them so much, and you've prepared them, you've purposed them, you've chosen them to be a set apart people, and because you've chosen them and you love them so much, you're going to completely lay waste and devastate the the biggest empire of the known world at the time in Egypt, and not just Pharaoh, and not just the land in which Egypt dwelt, but all of the false gods that Egypt recognized for the time. You're just going to lay waste to each and every one of them and show that you have a greater authority over what they worship. And so it's just an amazing story and an amazing walk, an amazing journey. We thank you for providing us an opportunity to be able to study it and walk through it every year. So we pray that you go with us and that you take the words that have been shared here today and you allow them to kind of settle and resonate into our hearts and our spirits and to stir us to ask questions and to seek more depth and intimacy with you in your understanding of who you are and who we are in you. We ask that you protect us and guide us, lead us as we go out into this world that will weigh us down again this next week, and that you bring us back safely, that we're able to congregate and study again in your presence next week. And we ask this in Yahushua's name. So thank you everybody for joining.
Yes. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom. The other.
What a great teaching.